Welcome to the NBA Coast to Coast podcast brought to you by thelines.com. Coming to you from the West Coast, Josh Lander, joined by my guy Nate Weitzer on the East Coast. And we are looking at a Tuesday night slate here in the NBA with only 3 games to choose from. Make sure to like and subscribe to that page. We are going to be coming back to you guys each and every weekday of this regular season, bringing you a couple game videos and our player props that we're continuing to stay roughly 75% or so on this season. Definitely want to go ahead and head to thelines.com as well. That's where we do have our great written content for you. And most importantly, our odds finder tool that you can go ahead and use to make sure you're getting the best juice back on all of those NBA bets you make this season. This one's going to be talked about. We are going to be talking about the Dubs in Dallas taking on the Mavis. Nate, let's go ahead and get into this little 3-game slate and then get into that one.
Yeah, the first game we are not doing a game video on because the Pistons are +5 at home. We don't know if Jaden Ivey or Bojan Bogdanovic are going to play. They're already without Cade Cunningham indefinitely. So that will obviously change things based on whether those guys go or not. I think the Knicks are in great position to win if they don't go, for sure. Warriors right now -2 at Dallas. That started as a pick'em line. The total crept up a little bit right now to 228. And then the other game we'll talk about, Clippers are +3.5 at Portland. A lot of stars out there, low total of 211. Yeah, I mean, you talked about the Warriors and Mavs meet. There can be some wild fluctuations for sure. I mean, teams that are heavily dependent on the 3-ball, teams that have some pretty stark home road splits and pretty stark differences in how they want to play in terms of the Warriors being routinely a top 5 pace team, Dallas being dead last in pace once again. Recently, I mean, Dallas has fought fire with fire and outgunned the Warriors, saying, you know what, your 3-point defense is not great. We can spread you out. Luka is an absolute problem for you and get great looks, especially at home. 4 of their last 5 home meetings in Dallas have gone over in the regular season. 8 of their last 12, including the playoffs overall. And it's basically based on that kind of efficiency that Luka can bring. The pace was up in a few, but their last meeting last March down to a pace of just 91. But Dallas hit 17 threes, a 134 offensive rating. And you look at the average now, they're getting 120 a game with a 98 pace. So they can play a little faster. Dallas coming back from a tough East Coast road trip, right, where they lost their last 3 against just fantastic teams, Boston, Toronto, and Milwaukee. Luka looked a little worn down at the front end of that back-to-back in Toronto. So I think he bounces back, though, like we saw last time they hit the road, right? And he just kind of faded into nothing in Washington, and then all of a sudden comes home, posts a monster triple-double against Portland. So I will say that Luka is probably, I mean, he's going to be in player props. He's probably who I would want to bet on if you're just looking at a player prop here. The home road splits are just incredible right now. 131 offensive rating versus 111 on the road, scoring 34.5 points per game. And against Golden State in particular, his last 3 at home, 37 points per game on a 42% usage rate with 12 free throw attempts per game. The Warriors defense, while I mean they're starting to pull it together on the road, they're still 29th in rating on the road versus 3rd at home. They're 27th in 3-point D versus 2nd at home. And they're allowing a ton of free throws wherever they are, which is why you see these numbers trend towards the over, along with the fact that Steph Curry leads an insanely efficient offense. They're starting to find their roles in the second unit to maintain that. So right now they're 5-1 to the over as road favorites, 8-1 to the over when they're just playing on normal equal rest with the opponent. And with Clay getting hot, I think it's fair to, call him the barometer for this team, right? So, I mean, yeah. The player performance doubles. Clay 20 points in a win is nearly +300. Clay 5 threes in a win, which he's averaging over these last 6, is +460. So I would look at that as the kind of the angle for the Warriors. And of course, Luka is going to have a big line if the Mavs are going to win.
Yeah, I mean that's the story of the narrative for their whole season. Obviously, I'll just go ahead and start. I was actually thinking a lot about this game through the lens of like how bad the Mavs are in the paint. and how average the Warriors are in the paint, but I don't think there's a big enough, advantage there in any way to sort of feel like you can pick on the Mavs if you're the Dubs down low. It's not the same team there's really the offensive rebounding isn't there. That would be what James Wiseman would have been there for. And Draymond's only recently sort of started to look like he can actually still box out centers and get those rebounds as he's been doing in the last few games. If they've started to pick things up a bit. I also think most importantly though is the 3-point percentage, which you touched on a little bit. The Mavs are much better defending the three at home, which is crucial, right? Both these teams, as you said, shoot a lot of threes. The Mavs not shooting a great percentage, but they're shooting a ton of them, and that's where they're getting a lot of their points. Obviously, it's Luka and spread offense with Luka off of that. The Dubs playing pretty well defending the three. I mean, top 15. They're not great, and it's something that I do think the Mavs can probably continue to take advantage of. They don't really need to change their game plan much from what they've seen in the past. Maybe you get a few more pick and rolls with Luka because you have Christian Wood now, but you're still looking at Luka and drive and kick, isolation ball, 40% usage, all the things that are Luka Doncic are just in the extreme this year, and it's kind of working. I mean, they're 9-10. They're much better defending the three at home, which is why they're 8-3 straight up at home and 1-7 straight up on the road. That combined with the fact that Luka is not just a one-man offense. I mean, he's like three guys, the equivalent of three guys on offense, essentially, when he's at home right now. Looks completely unstoppable, and is a huge reason for why they're so much better. But it's also that defense, right, where they're allowing 10 fewer points at home. They're limiting teams to 34% from three as opposed to 41% on the road is Dallas. So I'm nervous to pick the Dubs, even though we both like the fact that we see the trend towards success for them. Clay started, as you said, Clay being the barometer for that team. He started slow with his shooting the last 3 seasons that he's actually played at the beginning of the season. So that really wasn't before like 4 years ago. But even 4 years ago, 5 years ago, when he was playing in November and December, his shooting stats were still pretty poor, similar to how slowly he kicked things off this season, as opposed to what he's done over their last 6, where they've won 5 of those 6, and their only loss was that blowout to New Orleans, where there were no starters in that game for the Dubs. They just threw that one away and lost by 40. Other than that, they've won 5 of their last 6. Clay in that time frame has upped his points to 24 a game from about 15 a game, 14 and a half, with 24% usage. He's at 32 minutes a game, which is crucial. We talked about him starting to get more minutes like maybe a few weeks ago, and now he's finally back to over 30 minutes a game with 56% from three. 5.6 threes made a game out of 10 attempts from beyond the arc. Not sustainable all season for literally anybody, even Klay Thompson or Steph Curry, but it's definitely him getting, sort of making up for the way that he's been below his numbers and regressed back this season a bit. So if he's going to be getting that 24 a game, he's got 1.5 steals a game, which is crucial for him. His defensive ratings dropped down to about 109, 108.5 because it was closer to about 114 before that. And the same thing can be said for Wiggins. So both those guys up their percentages. Wiggins shooting 53, 51 splits in that last 6 as well. Couple steals. He's got his defensive rating down to 103 individually, which is crucial. Like that's what this team was missing, was defense, and that's what Wiggins is there for. That's what Draymond Green is there for, dropping his defensive rating to 104 from 111 previous to that. And I mean, there's some cupcakes in there for the Dubs for sure, but I mean, they're playing offensive juggernauts as well. I call them offensive juggernauts. The Timberwolves and the Jazz are definitely in the top 10 in offense for both of them. The Clips, nothing there. And then they got smacked by the Pellies. But either way, my point is they've still played enough teams for me to feel like they've turned a corner. I just don't know that this is the matchup to pick them to win. The only thing that I would feel good about is the fact that they, if Dallas is not going to be able to defend their three that well, then that does leave the door open for the Dubs. But I don't feel confident enough to bet too many units on this one. I would just try to find some value in the way of guys like Clay scoring more than 17, which we'll talk about, and maybe some Luka stuff in there as well. But I lean more props in this one than I do totals or lines.
Yeah, I mean, the total is interesting because the Mavs are obviously under machines, except when you get into this matchup. I mean, they're under Jason Kidd, they're 40-19 to the under at home, 11-3 when they're home dogs, which they're slight dogs here. And those totals going under by about 7 points per game. Of course, I mentioned the numbers, though. When they host the Warriors, that can all change because Steph and Luka are just game breakers. But, I mean, the last meeting, like I said, with that pace, it kind of screams regression in terms of both offenses. I mean, the fact that they both posted an offensive rating over 124 in a slow paced game makes me lean a little bit towards the under here. I do want to see the Warriors, though, continue to pull this out. I mean, it's stunning how overrated the Mavericks have been in terms of the spread recently, right? I mean, did you rattle off these numbers? 2-14 in their last 17 games, 0-9 this season after a win, which they're not coming off a win. They're coming off a 3-game road loss, but that just shows you that there's no continuity right now because, how much of it is just how much energy does Luka have? What can he do tonight? And their defensive scheme, they still haven't figured it out. JaVale McGee is not the rim protector they wanted, or he's not going to fit on both ends of the floor, to say the least. And I mean, yeah, with Steph out there, even with the Warriors dropping offensive efficiency on the road, I don't think it matters that you're good at 3-point defense in general. That's what I'm talking about, him being a game breaker. He just drags your defense out so far and then opens things up. That's why I'm looking at Clay as the keystone here, as the barometer, because if the Warriors, they use the threat of Steph to get Clay those looks, and he's hot right now, I think that could be the difference. That's why, I'm looking at the strong correlation play of you need Clay to get about 20 in this game for Golden State to win. Or Wiggins, also a possible guy to look at, but his efforts are going to be more important on the defensive end, I think.
It's true, but 16.5 points for Wiggins is kind of low as well. I often like to take, right now you take Clay. Look, he's hot. We'll talk about that, as we said in the player props video. I often like to take Wiggs when he's got a couple points less on his prop than Clay, just because he gets to the line more, and he has a few other ways to score when Clay's not hot. But when Clay's hot, it's like that's fish in a barrel, right? This is like the second best 3-point shooter of all time, we might all agree upon. So the only one being better on his team. But either way, I hear you, and the only problem with those stats about the Mavs being 2-14 to the against the spread there this season, their last 17 games, they covered in the first 2, and then since then they have only covered twice. The problem is they're also winning those games straight up. They just have these monstrous spreads this season, which sort of skews their numbers. I mean, the fact that they're 9-10 straight up on the season with a +2 net rating is wild, right? Like they have less wins, they have more losses than wins, yet they're positive overall. That's also because their spreads are massive. I looked at all their home spreads, especially averaging 7.5 points that they're giving at home this season. They're home favorites pretty much every single time, and when they are, those spreads are massive. So it's pretty wild to see that, and that's a huge reason for why they're 2-8-1 at home this season against the spread, yet they've won 8 of 11 at home straight up. So interesting numbers for tonight. It should be a good matchup with both these teams playing well and Luka back at home. So that's all the time we have for you, though. Make sure to come back, like, and subscribe to that page. We will be bringing you these videos each and every weekday of this regular season. So until we see you next, happy betting.